Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I have got an exciting night ahead of for you all. I have a very, very good friend of mine, Daniel Curcio. Daniel is representing the Equality Coalition, and Daniel is also one of the National Steering Committee members for Occupy Inauguration. He and I work on that platform together. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Daniel into the show. And here we go. Daniel, welcome to Real Progressives. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Steve. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be.
So let's talk a little bit. What is Equality Coalition? Tell our audience what Equality Coalition is.
Sure. So the Equality Coalition started back during the DNC marches, and what ended up happening was that it started out basically in Bernie Sanders' first live stream, and what we wanted to do was we wanted to try to find a way to animate Bernie Sanders, because at that point he was not really known by a lot of people. So what we tried to do is we started out as a small talk group, and that was it. We called it Rainbow Power, I think. And then I think we ended up calling it Rainbow Power, or a Gay Straight Alliance for Bernie Sanders, or something like that. So it had a lot of names, but it grew slowly. And the reason why it grew slowly was because I had a vision in mind, and that vision was always to help other people. And so what we wanted to do was not necessarily, give somebody a flyer and say, oh, by the way, this is Bernie Sanders, here, take it. No, what we wanted to do was we wanted to demonstrate Bernie Sanders by building up the issues, by building up the communities and solving some of the issues within those communities and the problems that we're having. So, for example, on the birthday of Bernie Sanders, we had a birthday party for him. And what we did was and we had a big cake, and we had it at, because we're an LGBTQIA straight alliance, formerly a Gay Straight Alliance. We had it at a gay restaurant, and it was a huge event. We had like 100 people there, and instead of people bringing gifts for Bernie, we actually brought school bags for kids at the Attic Youth Center, which is an LGBT youth center, and we set up all these bags and filled up the school bags with books and markers and all kinds of cool things. And so that this way, when kids receive these gifts, they would say, well, who is it from? And we say, well, it was from the Equality Coalition for Bernie Sanders. And, oh, who's Bernie Sanders? So it was more the idea of, let's try to animate people by showing who Bernie Sanders is. And then if they wish to talk about him, we would go ahead and do that.
So let's talk about, what has Equality Coalition become today? You guys are a lead organizer for a major initiative at the inauguration. What is it that you are morphing into? Because obviously you're becoming something even more than that. Talk to me about that. Where do you see yourself?
Right. It's actually pretty interesting, because it's kind of uncontrollable, in a sense, where we have a lot of people wanting to join the Equality Coalition, and they want to join because they want to change. They want to change their communities. They want to make their communities a better place. They want to make their communities a safer place, sanctuaries for people living there, so that everyone feels warm and welcome. And so what we decided to do was we decided to just be the change. And that was our slogan. We wanted others to say, hey, look, listen, I want to be the change. I want to do something to make this community that I live in great. And that's what I want to focus on. And what we try to do is we try to take those individuals' ideas and make them happen in the form of a group. So it's always better to take an initiative and join a group and be part of that and be part of a team, so you have collaboration happening. And at the same time, you're making friends, you're working with like-minded people, And it's really neat to see that we have some very, we have some polarities in our group. We do have some people who are right. We have some people who are left. We have some people who are moderate. But that's the best thing about us. We don't really classify extremities or polarities within politics, and we focus on what we call the social revolution, because I think that that's where the energy is. The energy isn't really in this politician or that politician per se. It's more about the ideas of how can we not band-aid this problem? How can we solve, cure, and rehabilitate the problem?
Okay. So what I want to do is let's talk a little bit about how you got involved in Occupy inauguration. Just so let me just clarify for everybody out there from Real Progressives land. When I met with Erikel Bloss online, Erikel being the individual who founded the Progressive Independent Party. And when I spoke to Erikel, the idea was that they were creating something special. They were creating a tent, a big tent for all the left to coalesce under, to be able to maintain their identity as whatever political spectrum they fell under. But the idea was to provide one tent for all the tribes to coalesce and become one movement. Since everybody has got very, very tribal instincts, they're very, very tied to their identity of their groups. The idea was to basically say, okay, we don't want that to be the issue. We don't want that to be the blocker for the unification of the left. So after she approached me, I said, you know what? Real Progressives would like very much to partner with you. Now, this is before Occupy inauguration. This is way back. And so from Jump Street, we had been, hey, we want to be a part of this unification of the left. And, of progressives, really, I want to be real frank about that. I want to talk about that a little bit later. But so when we came on board with this Occupy inauguration, we decided that we would, in fact, be one of the very early, I don't know if we were the first one, but we were one of the very first ones to sponsor PIP, but we were also one of the first ones to sponsor OI. And our goal here was not to be about one person, not to be about Donald Trump, not to be about Hillary Clinton, but to be about unifying the left, to take the Bernie Sanders message, that bigger than life message that unified us all, to take that and take that forward, not take hating Donald Trump or hating Hillary Clinton or hating anyone else, but to build this big tent that we could actually see progress in our lifetimes. So with that, Daniel, does that sound similar to your approach to why you joined up with Occupy inauguration?
Sure. I was, you'd asked, how I got involved. And so I was contacted by Evan Duke, and I think he found me somehow through the Young Turks, because it was the Equality Coalition's march on the inauguration. Back then, we were just simply Equality Coalition, but we had to change that to make it a little bit more easy to find on the web. So I was contacted by Evan, and Evan had asked me, what do you think? And after he had found me, because we led the 20,000 person march on that Monday, the 25th of July. And so what ended up happening was he was talking to me about these ideas. He said, so what do you think about, Trump and this and that and the other? And I said, well, I'll be honest, I'd like to stay away from these conversations, because the minute that someone says, I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican, is the minute that we build a wall between ourselves. But the minute that you say, hey, you know what do you think we could do to help homeless people? What do you think we could do to change the climate initiatives? What do you think we can do to rid the idea of tokenism and ableism and transphobia and things like that? And I said, those are really what we should be having conversations about, not necessarily this person or that politician or it was funny because I respect our guests at that rally. We had Jimmy Dore, we had Nina Turner, we had Tim Black. I mean, we had a lot of great speakers. We had the same progressive, and the list goes on. But the issue was where do we go from here? We didn't want to make it like what we call a crock pot phenomena. And that is throw it in, forget it. It's done, it's over, and that's it. What we wanted to do was we wanted to build a casserole, you know. And as you know, building a casserole, it takes a lot of time. You can't just you gotta make sure you have your ingredients layer nicely, make sure that when you cut into it, it looks really nice, and then finally you have this outcome, not just throw everything into a pot and be done with it, but more about where are we going in the future? What is this going to look like when it comes out of the oven? And I think that's where we're at right now. We're in the oven, and we're going to be in the oven for a while, and it's hot in here. And I want to tell you, it's hotter than the 25th of July. But that that is the idea. It's something that we really need to think about. This is not about an event, and I'm not saying that anyone in this for just a huge event is wrong or right. No. I think we should all come to the table and try to unify with each other. But I do think that the more important issue is the idea of seeing something, go further than just let's meet and that's it.
So let's talk about that for a minute, right? So Occupy inauguration has taken on a little bit of a change here recently. They have partnered up with the Disrupt J20 March, and I know that created some concern for the Equality Coalition, created some concern for Real Progressives as well. Can you go ahead and just express how that conflicts, what concerns that brought to you? Because I know your team is concerned and they have some questions. And how do you address that, Daniel?
Steve, it's tough. We are we're not. We're radical. We're radical because we believe in change, and we call that radical. There's a difference. I think somebody once said there's a difference between disrupting, right? There's a difference between disrupting and showing a presence. It's a matter of philosophy. And I don't know if when I speak from the Equality Coalition's position. Our position is more about the presence should be the disruption. Just being there should be the disruption. Just letting the news, the mainstream media folks see us, because I don't necessarily agree with violence. I don't necessarily agree with civil disorder. I do agree with civil disobedience. I think that's fine, but I'm not personally looking to get arrested. I'm a caregiver. Certainly not interested. And even when I work with other groups, I say right off the bat, I'm not getting arrested for this, and I think because I think it sets the wrong tone. And that's just a philosophical thing. It's not that one's better than the other. I just personally feel, at least for the Equality Coalition and its members, that my job and the national co-organizer's job, James Waltz, it's our job because we have a very decentralized government, if you will, running how this thing runs. Everybody's kind of a leader. No one's actually in charge of the Equality Coalition. We just have lead organizers. But what we try to do is we really try to say, what's in it? How are our members going to be safe, protected? And when our members don't feel safe and don't feel protected, we as a movement would leave. That's how it works. And, you know, our numbers are getting stronger. Our numbers are building up very quickly. And I'm assuming that after the inauguration, it's even going to build up more. And we just don't want to put anyone in jeopardy.
So let me give you my perspective on this, because you and I are simpatico on so many things. Our talks offline, I mean, you're a kindred spirit, man. I truly like have nothing but love for you, Daniel. So from my perspective, you know, I am an economic advocate. I am an activist for economics, and I'm an activist for Bernie Sanders' economics plan. I use that because that's the most tangible evidence of what I'm trying to present. But I'm also an advocate for what Jill Stein's Green New Deal is. And I know most of her followers couldn't figure out economically how to make 1/100th of her plan come true, much less the entire thing come true. And that's a problem for the entire progressive movement. So for me to distract from that effort, to act like Donald Trump trumps the understanding of how to pass a progressive agenda economically, you know, what I'm talking about isn't going to happen overnight. It's something that I've got to continue and bang my head against the wall against people that are screaming Rothschilds and a host of other things. And I just got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And this is a distraction to me. It is a progress killing distraction. That's my take. I'm just letting you know I am a Bernie Sanders-esque, not a Bernie Sanders endorsing of Hillary-esque, but a Bernie Sanders-esque. I would go to Liberty University and I would speak to them at Liberty. I would go to the KKK and say, guys, let's talk. What the hell are you doing? I would go wherever I could to take the message of truth to them. And I would do it in a way that was trying to present. Now, I have a shtick when I do my live streams because the stuff I talk about, let's be fair, most people think economics is like watching paint dry or grass grow. So I try to add a little flavor to it, okay? But the reality
Time
is,
to Noam Chomsky.
the reality is that I want people to pay attention and I want to grow this movement the right way. And Donald Trump has a shelf life. To me, what I'm talking about, you know what happened? Let me tell you what happened in this past election.
Sure.
Forget all the gaslighting, forget all the nonsense from the media. What happened was Bernie Sanders came to town with a plan that we all should have been prepared to defend. But most people are like, wait a minute, hold on. Are we able to say Medicare for all? Like, how do we even do that? What? Family medical leave too on top of it? And an infrastructure bill? And education?
Right.
Are you tripping? That's pie in the sky. And then Hillary would speak, that's pie in the sky. And they're going on their old knowledge. And they're like, it's pie in the sky. I'm telling you right now, we're going to have that same problem in 2020 or 2018 even, if I don't do what I plan to do and others don't take that and continue to do what I plan to do. And we create a groundswell of knowledge as opposed to ignorance so that the next person that comes up with big ideas isn't left at the altar because we can't defend them. And if we focus on Donald Trump, that's exactly what we're doing. We're diverting over there and we're not focusing on what we want. We don't have, not Trump is not a plan. It's not a plan. We need a bigger plan than that. And your unification is what I rally towards. That's what my mom called me up today. And my mom was very upset with me because she found out what I'm doing. You know? And she said, you know, I supported Bernie during the primaries. She said, but, you know, when it came down to it, I pulled the lever for Trump because I couldn't stand the thought of Hillary Clinton coming in there and killing my grandbabies in a war with Syria or killing them with a war with Russia or killing them, in, you know. And so she went through this whole process for me. And I felt like a big heel because my mom was disappointed in me. And I'm disappointed that she voted for Trump. But, you know, I don't want my mom disappointed in me. Not like that. Not that kind of thing. because she
Right.
knows what I'm about. I'm about building this thing, not diversions. So that sounds like what you're about. Even though we have a different focus, we are pulling for the same thing. We're pulling in the same direction. We're simpatico. And so how are you going to handle the shift? How do we still represent our ideals and values so that other people that share our ideals and values are still able to feel a part of this and that we can keep their focus that way as well? What are your thoughts on that? Because I think we have a voice here, and I think we have a right to stick to that voice. What's your thoughts?
Sure. So a couple of things that you mentioned. The first thing you said that I'm really big into economics, etc. And I want to touch on this because this is very important. You know, I believe that there are multiple revolutions, and it is unfortunate that Bernie Sanders had continually hounded the political revolution because there are so many more that exist, right? So I believe that there are four revolutions, and just recently now, in the last couple of years, five revolutions. So the first revolution is the political revolution, which is very well known. It's been talked about over and over. Then we have the economic revolution. We have the civil revolution. We have the ecological revolution, and those are that's pretty recent now with global warming and such, which is not a hoax. But the last is the social revolution. And so I think I said them all right. I believe that the social revolution is what we chose to fight. We wanted to pick that fight because we believed that that would be the best way to promote social justice, racial justice, to combat orientationism, to combat ableism, and to combat these things that are, and the list goes on: transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. I mean, these things go on, and we really, if we step away from our phones for a bit, if we step away from the TV for a bit, and we actually get out there and hold conversations, have conversations with people, I think that's the best way that we could, move forward. And I think you said, well, how do we do it? What is the answer? The answer is not having one-time events. At the Equality Coalition, one of our initiatives, by the way, we are a volunteer-run and driven group. We are not a nonprofit. We have no interest in being nonprofit, nor will we ever consider that, because once money starts getting involved, it's like it starts getting hairy on what you do, what you can't do, and things like that. So we're going to keep this idea of being a volunteer run and driven group. And so one of our initiatives is called the PMA bike ride. And what it is, it's a bike ride where basically people get on bikes, we buy pizzas, and we hand slices of pizza to homeless people. But because of the Equality Coalition, we have something called 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars are broken down into what we like to say activism, advocacy, outreach, and education. And once we celebrate those 4 pillars and have, we do have an activism team, we have an outreach team, we have an education team, we have an advocacy team. But the thing is that all of those teams incorporate those 4, I guess, philosophies into each of the initiatives. And that's the way we build movements. Not, again, by saying one time and it's done, but the best part about the bike ride, it happens once a month. It happens once a month. And the best way to gain traction in a movement is not to say set it and forget it like the crock pot I was talking about earlier, but to make that casserole and to deal with it and to really know that this is going to be some hard work. And a lot of people say, well, just throw it together. But you want to make it nice. You want to make a layer and things like that. And that's the 4 layers that we have in our casserole. And that's what we that's why I said it's really important that we recognize that when we are doing initiatives, we are working, we are engaging with others at the table. And if other groups or other people don't want to engage with us, we don't give up. We keep at it. We keep trying to reach out, and we will do what we do to make it right. And I think that that's, one of the ways we do it. We could keep our autonomy. The Equality Coalition doesn't have to become another group. The Philadelphia, the Solidarity Forum, which was the DNC Action Committee, doesn't have to be another group. But what we do need to do is we all need to come together. One of the things I like about the Solidarity Forum is that they're actually a group of groups, and we'd like to see more of these groups, that they allow you to keep your autonomy, but they don't dissolve all of the groups and all of their own unique missions.
Right.
So that's the way.
That's okay. I think it's interesting that Real Progressives is building around 4 pillars as well, slightly different because we're taking a different approach. We have policy, which is where our subject matter experts will reside. We have media, which is media. We have education, because we have to educate not just economics, but other aspects as well. And then, of course, we have activism, which is what we're doing here with you. We have 6 knowledge areas. Right now, we're still new. We're new in terms of developing as an organization. We've had a few setbacks recently, but trust me, a setback is a setup for a comeback. And we've got really right now, primary focus, the most developed focus is the economic side. Something you said was really powerful to me. And that is, just because others aren't buying in doesn't mean you stop. And so what happens a lot of times in these kind of movements, and you just saved me from doing it myself, when you have a louder voice, when someone else is a louder voice, it's easy just to go and play beta male. It's easy to just go tuck tail and just say, whatever, it's too hard, F it. I'm just going to go ahead and back down, back away, screw it. And the reality is that no, I've got an agenda. You've got an agenda. Where we meet is where we meet, but we have agendas. My agenda stands no matter what else is going around me. Where I go, I bring my agenda. And that agenda is the agenda we have asked our donors to participate in. I wouldn't want to do something that would violate what we say we are to the people that actually do donate to us to help us keep going. And we do have a bigger, mission. We do want to become a 501c3 for a variety of reasons, because what we need to do is we need to create really, really slick video productions, really slick education material to be able to teach economics for inner city kids, friggin' young, rich kids, old people, young people, middle-aged people, people with good educations, bad education, whatever. And we need to be able to hit people every which way but loose,
That's right.
So for us, we're looking to be able to get grants, and we're looking to be able to do different things. So I don't want to tarnish our name or our reputation by doing something that I have counseled heavily against, for example. I've countlessly said, this movement is bigger than Trump. It's bigger than Bernie. Bernie always said, not me, us. Jill even said, it's in our hands. There's a host of things. I loved how Jill reached over to Bernie and said, hey, listen, there's room for you here. We want to carry your revolution and we agree with you. Now, Bernie, made his decision. I don't agree with it, but he made his decision. But that essence still exists. I didn't sign on for the man. I don't need a savior. I needed a movement. I needed the mission. And we've got that if we don't choke it and screw it up and turn it into something else. Yeah. That's where my head's at. So Daniel, thank you very much for giving me a second wind here. Cause I'm a pretty big guy and I have a big voice, but you know what? I'm tired and exhausted because you've got all sorts of enemies coming at you from every different which way but loose. And after a while, you just go, well, maybe, you're all right, buddy. You're all right, man. So tell me, what is it that our listeners, our viewers can do to help out in prepping for Occupy inauguration? What are some of the things that we would like to see them do? I'm acting as the host here and I'm putting it on you, but we're in this together. But I'm going to still let you answer the question.
That's okay. I think it's how to get involved, and as far as Occupy inauguration is concerned, you could always go to the Facebook page. We could put links up after for all this, links up to all the events that are taking place, March on the inauguration. But remember, again, it's not about just attending an event and then going home and being done with it. It's about, carrying the flag, carrying, the light in our own hands. And I don't know if you've seen that meme in on Facebook. You get them in some messages, and somebody's handing you a hand like this, and there's like a little light in it, and then it's passing it on to you. And I think that's kind of the idea. I think that's what we need to do. We need to really pass light onto each other, right? And the reason is because light does a lot of things. Light sheds, light takes away some fear. Light helps us understand each other better. Light gives us energy, and it does something even more great than all of those. When you have light, we see each other. We see each other. I spoke to a friend of mine I spoke to a couple friends of mine today, actually. One from ADAPT, which is ADAPT. It's the National Grassroots organization for people living with disabilities and disability rights movement. Very powerful. And I also spoke with Brianna Jones tonight as well with the Solidarity Forum, and we were talking. And one of the things we said was that I've learned so much in the past year and a half, and I think that's where it is, Steve. I think I think what we need to think about is: are we learning? Or are we just doing a lot of talking? Now, I could talk my ass off. But, sorry, I hope that wasn't a bad
No,
word.
you're fine, man. You're fine.
Okay.
Wait till you see Ellis on Sunday night. He's more than happy to drop an F-bomb.
So but I really think that, we can sit and talk about all we want. I want to, I want to get somebody from, Black Lives Matter in my group. No, it's not about that. It's not about, tokenism. It's not about saying, well, we don't have somebody that's gay. We don't have somebody that's in the LGBTQIA, group. We need to have that diversity. You know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is people's intentions and understanding each other. Because sometimes diversity could be a little bit insulting in a way. When you're inviting somebody into your group just because of this or just because of that, instead of saying, hey, how can I help? How can we work together?
Let me tell you something, though. I want to be real honest here. And this is a shame. This is a damn shame. But there are people that are very knowledgeable about certain subjects, but they lack the struggle that comes with that. Okay? So their voice, even though they speak of knowledge, they speak of it in a secondhand fashion. So people are oftentimes looking for, LGBT, and all the other letters that I'm just not skilled enough to say, but they're looking for somebody that knows that life. I would love to have, a transgender individual on the team that could spread, that could teach. It's more about teaching the experience than it is about we need a token. Because, I could talk about it. I could read from a book and say, well, this is what it says on page 5, but
you don't know.
I'll
You know,
never know.
let me in Curcio versus Board of Education. When I was in a federal lawsuit with the school district of Collingswood High School, what ended up happening was I changed the law. Because I came out in school and as a high school teacher, and they fired me. It took them 3 years to get rid of me, but I wasn't going easily. I don't go down easily, and I won that lawsuit. And I won it because I did not believe that I had to hide who I was and continually have to play in this cis, you know, gendered, patriarchy, sort of like, white male dominated, group that's straight. I mean, I'm like, no, I should be able to go to the teacher's faculty lounge and be like, yeah, I went out with my boyfriend last night. I don't have one. I'm single. So, I'm like, but I'm just saying that, I'm like, I should be able to talk about that as a very real like thing and not have to be afraid of who I am because I'm slightly different, just because, of one thing, because of the person I love. I think that it's kind of childish to look at another person and say, yeah, I can't work with that, or I don't agree with that. And more importantly, being hurtful in a way that, when you are going through something like this, really trying to hurt that person because of who they are. And I'm 46, Steve, so I grew up in a much different environment than people are today. What I grew up with is very similar to what individuals um, who are trans would, in a transgender community would be kind of equal. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So what I grew up with in the 80s and 90s and whatnot, and even early 2000s it's a much different world today for gay men, and so we need to understand that it goes beyond. I had a conversation with Tom Earl, the CEO of Liberty Resources Incorporated. They're an awesome center for independent living for people living with disabilities to have control of their own lives. And we were talking about permission affirmative, and that just meant that instead of and Tom is visually impaired, and he uses a walking stick, and he told me, he said, one day I was walking across the street, Dan, and and he said, somebody literally just went up to him and took the walking stick out of his hand, wrapped his arm around Tom, and helped him cross the street. Well, another person would be like, oh, that's so sweet, that's so kind, but what we forget is that, did you ask permission? Did you even forget that this person is a human being? And so I believe that if we understand the other side, if we understand more, then I might not step into their shoes. I'm not able to empathize. I could certainly connect, but I can't empathize, because I was never there.
Right.
And as a result of that, I really would like to say that these are things that these are the discussions we need to have. And that's how that light is carried, by talking.
I want to talk about this. There's light bulbs going. I had no idea where this conversation was going to take us. I thought it would be a lot more about the other stuff. I'm really digging this. So let's talk about this for a second. You had made mention that you guys are not really political per se. You're really the social revolution, and your idea here is really to cross lines, not to stay within your lines, because your goal is to spread relationships. Your goal is to cross lines and build points of connection. And what I like about that is what I talk about often within our own community over here is we've got individuals that are going into Republican communities talking economics. We are progressives, but we believe that our progressive truth, it's not a political ideology. We believe that we're actually walking through the door, presenting them something that is non-political economics. It just is. The stuff we're talking about isn't like, well, if you do this or if you do that. The stuff we're talking about simply is a description of what is. And so
Right.
we're crossing lines. And the idea of watching people get beaten because they're homosexual, watching people get beaten because they're trans, watching people get beaten because, I don't know, whatever, they're otherly abled or whatever, right? When you think about those, it's not the community that already gets you that you got to worry about. It's when you're outside the bubble, the protective bubble, that you have to worry. So the progress occurs beyond the bubble. So how in the it is antithetical to me to alienate so many people when our goal is in fact to make progress. If we're just trying to convince each other, we have failed because that's not progress. Although I will tell you, on my side, there are a lot of people that claim to be progressive that have right-wing economic thinking that just doesn't quite map up with what they say they want. They want a Green New Deal, yet they'll cut the legs out from under every single economic tool available to them to enable one. So I think that from my standpoint, it's a little different because we do have to fix the internals before we can go outside. But you, however, you can't afford, you in particular, and trans and others who are seen in this bigoted world that we live in as different. Like to me, I really don't even care in the sense that it doesn't change anything. I love you for the human being you are. I love you for the values you bring. And coming from a conservative background, I know the sad part is it's the ick factor. In their mind, they're going through, well, what does that mean? Oh my God, what does that mean? And all of a sudden they've got and you're just sitting there making a pancake or sitting there flicking a light switch on. And then their mind, they're going, what, oh my God, and it's so funny that it's the fear. It's this fear. It's self-induced fear. And the only way to change fear is educate, expose, to love them through it, and to build those connections so that they see past their ick factor and they start realizing, hey, we're all just human beings. We all just want to be loved. I mean, personally, I think you're doing great work, Daniel.
I tell this story, and not many people know that, when you win a federal lawsuit, it usually isn't published if you don't have a lot of money. It's kind of like, okay. But I tell that story about Collingswood because it really was the changing point in my life that made me understand how terribly backward we are as human beings and not enlightened. But the second, and it really is a story about love of self, to be proud of who you are. And that's when I began after I left the United States Marine Corps, honorably discharged. It's something that I'd say, it's a story of love of self when you're able to stand up and be proud of who you are as a person, as you should be proud of who you are, and as anyone out there should be proud and independent as they are. But the second story I want to tell you tonight is a story of love of others. And this is where the Equality Coalition kind of came in at. I'm going to tell you the story. So I was at an Equality Forum event, which is basically a way, it was kind of not really a protest against gay pride. I'm kind of particular about gay pride. I'm not really for it, and I could go into that later if you want to ask me that question again, why. And I'll explain very detailed why. But it's more about, the Equality Forum is more about people coming together and understanding the people in the LGBTQIA community, that understanding that we are not just people on a float with G-strings that, are, God only knows what's going on in the floats. And that's not who we are. We are doctors. We are lawyers. We are sanitation workers. We are, we are caregivers. We are teachers. And that is the essence of why I'm against the idea of gay pride celebrating things when, to be quite honest with you, we still haven't won all the fights we need to win, and these things should actually be protest marches instead of celebrations on floats with corporations paying God only knows how many money to God only knows how much money to be in these. But more importantly, the love of others comes from a story that I want to tell you. So I'm at Aquatic Forum, and I'm actually helping out, giving out T-shirts, and I see this young boy across the street. He obviously was homeless, and I was like, I'm looking at him like, oh my, this guy needs some help. And I basically, I'm over here, and I'm walking up to him, and I said, hey, do you need some help, bud? And he didn't really say much. But what I found out was I just said, hey, why don't I help you with your resume? Maybe I'll get you, some some food. I'll try to find you a job. I'll try to find you work so that you can have independence. Well, 1 week later, he was still with me. 2 weeks later, he was still with me. And what ended up happening was I couldn't afford it because I was going through a federal lawsuit at the time. So what ends up happening is that 2 weeks, Steve, actually turned into a month. And he finally told me his story that he was in a drowning accident at the age of 5, in a coma for several months, and his family left him to be. His family is the 1%, and they had help, and they just kind of ignored him his whole life. And so there was a lot of neglect in the family and things like that. And what ends up happening is that, a lot of my friends were like, Dan, you got to let this guy go. But I just found out this story, and I'm like, how can I put this guy back on the street? Well, 1 month turns into 2 months, 2 months turns into 2 years, turns into 3 years. And would you believe that 13 years later, I'm still helping out that person have a life of supported independence? And I think that's the reason why the Equality Coalition stands for what it does, because of the idea of love of others. And I never even got paid for the first several years. So the story is that I did it out of the kindness of my heart, and I did it not to brag or boast, but what I only wanted to see was this young man to have a life of independence. And now he's actually on the board of directors for a local organization. He started his own group, which is an advocacy group to get it's called Sci-Fi Connections, and it helps people living with disabilities get onto the big screen. It also helps sci-fi people that are living with disabilities have access to venues and conventions and things like that, And so that's kind of what where the Equality Coalition kind of came to be. It came because of my own personal experience. My own personal experience of being a target of bigotry, my own personal experience with the 1%, my own personal experience with understanding someone who deserves the same right to be as independent as I am, and not and keep that control. Later on, actually, I am now working for him, and he's my employer, but he's also my little brother too. And it's really interesting because that's kind of how this thing formed. It formed really, Steve, because of my experience. I want everybody in my group. Well, I'd like to say in the group. Sorry about that. I'd like to say everybody in the group in the Equality Coalition understands that we need to all become friends. We not just working together, not just going into, a cubicle saying, all right, I'm going to do my volunteer hours and leave, but actually enjoying their time. I always say when you come to an Equality Coalition meeting, if you leave that meeting and you walk out that door and you put your hand on that doorknob and you don't feel satisfied, you don't feel complete, you don't feel like by the time you've left, you've done something for your own community, you've helped someone out, you fought against the system, that is my fault for not letting you feel that. And we make sure, and when everybody leaves, I always ask, do you feel like we've done something? Do you feel like we've accomplished something? And that's really what this is about, because we take that energy and follow it up with our next meeting, building more initiatives. That's what the Equality Coalition is. It's a coalition of initiatives, not a coalition of groups, a coalition of initiatives. And so it's a little bit different than a group of groups or an umbrella group. So that's kind of the story, man.
So no, it's absolutely wonderful. And let me tell you something. I mean, we are definitely looking for people like yourself and Equality Coalition to help real progressives beyond Occupy Inauguration to think big, dream big, and do big things. And, I really, really like your approach. I like your demeanor. I like your entire ethos. Not just yours, but I like the way Equality Coalition is set up. I want to talk about something that I think you'll probably relate to, and that is, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober several times, but I've been sober for 10 years now. And that process is I've never been gay, and not like, whatever. I've never had anything other than just the straight guy issues. However, being an alcoholic is an other. It's a box other, and it's one of those invisible ones. It's not like a broken arm. They just assume that, well, you're an alcoholic or whatever, so therefore you're a bad person, you're this, you're that. And they've got a million things similar to what I know the gay community went through in terms of it had no basis in necessary reality. It just was what went through other people's heads, and maybe part of it was based on an individual experience that is true in its own little microcosm, but it's not macro true across the board. And what ends up happening is you carry the stigma of that one bad person. Like, look in the African American community, you've got these impoverished people that are generational poverty, that are trapped in war zones where white flight has occurred, businesses have left, and they're trapped without means of taking care of themselves, etc. And what happens? The media picks up on the people that are down at the bottom that are really, really struggling to survive. And then they watch and they go, yeah, there's what I'm talking about. And then you look over at the alcoholic and you say, yeah, there's another one. That, and you look at it and yeah, there's another one. And it's like this self-reinforcing negative paradigm. And I bring this up only because it sounds to me like people like yourself and what your group does is, in essence, I know it's got a specific purpose, but I imagine people of addiction live within your community as well. It doesn't know gender, it doesn't know race. It's kind of an all-encompassing screw job. So when you think about that, what does Equality Coalition do in the realm of helping out with addiction? Because it's got to be hitting you guys too. What is your take on that?
Sure. Well, let me give you a little bit of some of my background. I worked for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as a comprehensive risk reduction therapist who worked with basically a four-pronged diagnosis. It was mental health, it was physical health issues, it was, they had to have an immunocompromised problem, and they had to have an addiction. And so I had to work with the big four, and I ran group and I did one-on-one sessions as the lead mental health counselor for a floor. And it was a job that probably was one of my favorite jobs because I really did help people change. You know, we go to therapists sometimes, and sometimes therapists are good. They're very good. They're very important, but they want you to keep coming back. They want you to keep on coming back for the ching ching effect. And the problem with that is instead of saying, look, I believe that within this amount of time, this is our goal, within this amount of time, you will be able to move forward. And so we need to recognize invisible. This also brings up the idea of invisible disabilities. I mean,
Yes.
think about that, right? Think about how
Arthritis.
many people on the street are living with invisible disabilities, and you know, and don't even think, wait, maybe this person might have a problem they need help with, such as the fact with a traumatic brain injury, such as Jeremiah underwater for 20 minutes in a coma for a few months, you know? And so people living with addiction, it is something that we don't pity because we don't believe in pity. We will never pity, but what we try to do is say, look, remember, especially with addiction, it comes from who? It comes from within. It comes from you. The idea to want to change. So if we could try to do whatever we can and help the community get to that point that they want to change and help themselves get out of that funk, you know, that's hurting their bodies, that's hurting their relationships, that's destroying their families, and it's clobbering their life. How do we really bring them back into the world that would be a safer place for them and a much more acceptable place for them and not look down? We don't believe no one is higher than anyone. No president is higher than any sanitation worker on the street. No one is higher than another person. And that is something we need to think about. You know, if we start looking down on people and we start pointing fingers and saying, oh, look, you know, whatever. No, absolutely not. And the Equality Coalition will never stand for any of that. That's why I always say that this is not about Trump. This is about so many more issues that we need to continually fight day in, day out until we rid the world of them all. Until
Amen.
we can one day say, we don't need to protest, we don't need to have live streams, and that we're living in that utopia, that's the day that we've won. Until then, it's a fight. It shouldn't be a gay parade once a year or coming out day. What is that? You know, I mean, I don't understand it. We should be coming out every day of the week. We should be proud of who we are.
Right.
We should be understanding who we are. And that's, I guess that's it. That's it.
Well, you did wonderful, man. We're up against the hour. I want to give you 2 minutes here, Daniel, to close out about Occupy Inauguration, close out about Equality Coalition, and close out and just say hello. So go for it, Bob.
Thanks. So, you know, I think we've learned a lot tonight. I think, you know, when every voice comes onto your show, they're going to bring new ideas and, you know, new things to think about. I think we really should start understanding and be open about what we see as our reality versus what we think is other people's realities. And when you're going to join it, you don't have to join the Equality Coalition. You don't have to join a group. You could be the change yourself. You know, it is good to be in a group, I think, just because it's nice to work in collaboration with other people. But, you know, one of the things we do in our group is if we find somebody that doesn't really like what we're doing, we try to point them into a direction that they would actually want to be in. So we keep that light going. You know, it's not about our group being the best group or the biggest, baddest group. It's about, hey, you know, this might be something for you. Occupy Inauguration and Equality Coalition are very similar in that we want to unite everyone in something that's long lasting in something that doesn't end, in a fight that we've really just started. It's been, a lot of people say it's been going on, but in the spectrum of time, it's not. It's pretty new, and so even if you say it's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years, it's still new. It's still new. And so what we really need to think about is making sure that people join Occupy Inauguration. People look on Facebook for the Equality Coalition and see if our group is something you like. See if Occupy Inauguration, see how you can help out, see how you can join, see how you can make things happen. And that's really what it's about. Not the one thing, not to drop it in the crock pot and forget it, but the making the casserole and being in the oven until it's done. And when we come out, we are going to be stronger. We are going to be louder. We're going to feel better about who we are. We're going to feel more confident. And that is the essence of this movement, joining one another in one incredible fight.
Awesome. Daniel, this is Steve Grumbine with Real Progressive, Daniel Curcio with the Equality Coalition, and we both are on the National Steering Committee for Occupy Inauguration. I know that they're looking for funds to help offset some of the costs of just the permits and all the other things that go with this. And trust me, poor Erikel and Evan and Calvin Priest and David Cobb and my goodness, Keon and who am I missing, man? Come on, roll with me.
Keon Bliss, Al George Friday.
There are so many people trying to pull this off, and funds are needed. We'll put the link up in the narrative for this. If you guys can donate even a small amount to help offset the costs, it'll be great. I mean, there's some great speakers. If I'm not mistaken, I think I've heard Chris Hedges will be going to this. You'll
right.
have.
We also got we also got Charles Eisenstein with Gift Economics. We have Asa Caliph from Black Lives Matter PA who'll be speaking. We have great speed. Lee Camp, I believe, might even be joining us. So we have a great lineup.
Tim Canova, I believe, is another.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, all right. Well, look, folks, I'm going to go ahead and we're just a little bit over, but you know how the networks are. We don't have a network, so we're good to go. Is it real quick? Do you have a second? I want to see if there's any questions from the audience because we have almost 40 people been watching the whole way through. Does anybody have any questions about Occupy Inauguration that Daniel or I can answer? Or, do you have any questions about the Equality Coalition? Just quick. If you don't, that's great. We'll go ahead and close off. If you do, go ahead and ask them. We'd love to be able to try and answer them. All right. Oh, so I think I saw something here. Wish you both the best of luck. Really, Chris Hedges, always respected. Okay. All right. Well, look, it looks like we're comment free. I want to thank everybody for joining Daniel and I. This was a truly wonderful experience. Daniel's good people. This is what it's all about. It's nice to have the big names come on and everything, but regular people being able to talk about how life really is and showing you, look, neither one of us are like big players, and we're sitting here trying to help out organizing, doing things to keep this progressive movement going. Folks, you can do this too. You can pitch in. You can be a part of things. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this thing down. You guys have a wonderful night. This is Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives, Daniel Curcio with the Equality Coalition. Have a great night, everybody.
Great night. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.